This is the Frontline Focus podcast, a show dedicated to those in the field focusing on their development as the key to the construction industry's progress. This is Season 1. Our focus will be on the hidden cost of safety. In each episode, we will talk with a construction industry professional to hear their thoughts about how to shift the frontline focus. All right. This is exciting. This is something that's been in the talks for a while. This show that you're about to listen to is the idea between two guys that have been in construction, came together through safety from very different sides, and have all these ideas. We have all these stories. We know so many people, and we want to move the industry forward. We want to shift the focus of the front line. And so what you're about to check out, we're calling this podcast the Frontline Focus, and it's brought to you by Salus. It's powered by Salus. In fact, along for the ride with me is the founder and the CEO, Gabe Guetta. How are you doing, sir?
I'm good, Rob. I'm good. I'm excited too. I'm not going to lie to you when you first, because it was you that's kind of spawned the thought of putting forward a podcast, and I was like, there's so many podcasts out there, Rob. Really, we're going to do a podcast, and also safety, man. Safety sucks, right? Like safety, it's not fun. It's not sexy. Maybe we'll get some engagement around safety talks. I mean, I love the safety professionals in the world, and they're going to want to get engaged, and they're going to want to kind of get in deeper. But I was like, if we're going to want to solve the bigger problem, if we want to focus on the front line and shift the mindset around safety, protecting the business, crossing the T's, dotting the I's, and actually getting field level workers to buy into safety or understand safety, feel like they're getting value out of safety, because if they're not getting value, they're not going to participate. How are you going to do that through a podcast? How are we going to actually get people to talk about this? And I think what changed for me is when we start to go deeper, when me, you, and Jeff started talking and brainstorming and talking about, okay, how do we actually get people to start caring about safety? And there's a stigma around safety, right? So how do we break that down? And when we started talking about the series and the topics, I loved it. I thought we're tackling the real life aspect of safety, the real life conversation that needs to be had, not the ideal, right? A lot of the times when you start talking about anything litigious or anything to do with government, enforcement, what's the word I'm looking for? Not legal, accountants, lawyers, those types of things. It ends up, you do the bare minimum. It gets like in your company, those aspects of it are like, okay, we're running the business, we're doing what we have to do. And then there's a team of people that are focused on the legality of how to make sure we don't get sued or whatever else. And it's not a fun thing to talk about. And so I think when you remove it, but like when you talk to great lawyers or even CFOs of companies, the best people that understand the legal side can translate that, understand it, and still power the business in an incredible way using those things. And I think that's what we're trying to do with safety. We're trying to find ways to talk about it. And safety, when you do it the right way, can power your business in ways that we've never seen before, right? You start to get this buy-in from the field, right? You start to get information and data and collaboration from the field through safety that you've never seen before. There's a conduit now between the office and the field. And anyways, that's me ranting on here. But Rob, like, what are you excited about? What are you feeling when we've been kind of talking about this and what's coming?
I'm right there with you on the energy. And I agree with you that there are lots of current podcasts. There's lots of shows about safety. And yeah, safety and a lot of work and a lot of parts of the construction industry is still a four-letter word. You and I both know what the mentality has looked like. But as our name implies, there has been a shift. There's been a shift going on for several years. I'll arguably say that I think, for better or worse, COVID ripped the Band-Aid off of safety. Because when it came to the point to become, at least in the United States, when you had to be deemed essential and safety was rocketed to the top of operations, like, what are we going to do? How are we going to make this happen? So many safety professionals were brought in two conversations that they had not been before. And it was really, again, as the name is implying, that front line. How are we going to be able to keep workers working on the front line to keep them safe? And so I think those stories need to be told. And there's a time that I think you and I can bring some very different conversations. So for those people that have never met you or heard of the company that you are at the helm of, who is Gabe? Let's give people a little bit of an idea. Like, why are they going to listen to these two guys coming to the show?
Yeah, for sure. Let's dive into the who we are. But one thing before we dive into that, COVID, great point, but also COVID also put a very hard light on safety, or created some of the stigma on safety. It divided nations, not just a nation, nations around the pain and how much safety really sucks, right? When we think, and when people, I mean, people sometimes give me shit for saying safety sucks. Then I challenge them, like, was COVID fun? Whether you believe in it or not, whatever your view is, was it fun? No, it sucked. And the reason it sucked is because you have to actually put those safety measures in place to prevent yourself from, getting whatever it may be, wearing the masks, sanitization, 6 feet apart, not seeing friends, family. That's not fun, right? And the reality is, okay, COVID, again, whether you believe in it or not, that's one thing. On a job site, it's the same mindset that's taken to prevent incidents or injuries or keep you safe. Those things are put in place on a daily basis, and they're not fun to have to put a mask on, eye protection, hand protection, hearing protection, fall protection, stop, think before you do something, fill out this form, get that training. It's not fun. I'm getting paid to show up on site and get a task done. And before I can get the task done, which that's why I'm here. This is the mindset. I have to do all these things, right? That's the barrier to my value. And so my background it's different, Rob. Like, it's not different. There's many people with the same background as me, but as far as the position that I'm in as a CEO of a founder and CEO of a safety software, I don't have a safety background at all. I don't have a software background. I started as a labor in construction at 18, worked my way up in that industry until I was about 32 before I transitioned into starting Salus. But I started working for a general contractor labor, and then I spent 10 years working for a company that specialized in window installation in high rises. And high risk job. When I started with them, safety was wear hard hats, steel toe boots, get the job done. If it's dangerous, do it on a Sunday, do it on the weekend, do it after hours. Wasn't bad. That's just the reality of how we handled the view on safety, right? Like, it was really much a lot of safety was there if you're hurt, right? If you're hurt, that's why safety's there. They're there to save you, help you. And then the shift for me was actually working for one of the large general contractors in Canada when we showed up on site and our crew called me and said, we had about 100 employees and we did about 5 to 8 high rises a year. And I was running the company at the time and said, hey, they won't let us on site. I said, what do you mean? Said, well, they say we need a safety manual and we have to prove that we're following it. I'm like, what does that even mean? So I don't even understand what that means. So I'm going to call them and find out. And so, that was my introduction to, like, okay, yeah, you work safe, which we all, we had to wear hard hats, steel toe boots, and a high vis vest. That was basically table stakes at the time. And then this introduction to more compliance-based safety was an eye-opener. It was like, wow, I have to get 55-year-old window installers to fill out paperwork. Like, that hasn't happened. They haven't done that in 10 years. Right? And then, okay, now all of a sudden another company is starting to enforce it. Another general contractor, and another one is like, wow, okay, we got to hire a safety team now to manage this. And now, okay, I'm learning a lot more about the ramifications of not being safe and what could happen if somebody gets hurt. And actually, because, the managers of this company could be legally, criminally liable for something that happens. Wow. Anyways, long story short, I started to get deeper into the understanding of health and safety running that company, constantly going to sleep at night, worried about liability. Is there a 22-year-old window installer on the side of the building right now where fall protection expired 3 months ago, which by the way happened multiple times, right? We just didn't know because it's not even in a spreadsheet. It was just tracked on the person with the certificate. Anyway, so we transformed our company, introduced a paper process, safety consultants, the works. But with still reactive mode, like 2 months later, by the time we could figure out if we were protected, reviewing the paperwork. And we ended up having an incident happen where somebody dropped a steel L angle from the 14th floor of a building into a parking lot, almost killed somebody. And so I got written up at the top of the company for that. There was holes in the processes that we had and missing paperwork. And so I took that failure to elevate the business and couldn't get past paper. Like, we'll always be doomed to repeat. It's just a matter of when. And that's where Salus was born. Somebody actually said, hey, you should create an app. I'm sure some other people in the industry would be interested. And so a good friend of mine that I still play hockey with, knew how to build software, owned a software company, building mobile apps and web apps. And Robbie, who is the co-founder of the company and CTO now, we started that process about 2018. And now we spread across North America. And our focus has really always been worker-centric. Software that works in the field. It doesn't matter if you have all the flashy lights in the world. Doesn't matter if you don't get field level adoption, if you don't get them to buy into it, if you don't have the ease of use. Everything else after that is easier because it's just a matter of manipulating it. Doesn't mean it's easy. It's easier. Anyways, Rob, sorry. That's the long-winded answer to your question, but I mean, you have a very different background than I do. That's why I love this marriage. Like, you also didn't start in safety though. But
that's correct.
Yeah, tell me about yourself.
There's so many safety
Tell
professionals.
Everyone about yourself. I know you.
It is crazy
Tell the
to
world.
hear so many stories from different safety professionals that have been around for a while, because there's definitely a shift there of, I do not have a degree like you in construction or safety. I have a degree in religion and philosophy. I got an introduction into this industry at 28 years old. So this was second career came out of, in the United States, what they called the US Peace Corps, served overseas, went a different direction from what I was being educated for, had this opportunity. And I was hired by a contractor that at the time.
Hold on, Rob. How do you get into, but how do you choose construction? Like, how do you go from religion, Peace Corps, which you have some crazy stories around the Peace Corps too. I've heard some of them. That's awesome. Why construction? Is there somebody in your family? Like, what happened there?
I actually had a brush with construction as a teenager. I tell the story on stage in a lot of presentations that I actually grew up around construction. One of my dad's golf buddies, so my dad was a banker. One of his golf buddies actually was the very influential person in the Atlanta chapter of the IBEW, which is associated with NECA. So the Electrical Contractors Association. On the labor side, I was around somebody, and it was really interesting. I remember growing up and hearing comments about Mr. Jimmy that my dad would make about his golf buddy. And
Mr. Jimmy, I like it.
Yeah, Mr. Jimmy. And I remember sitting as a teenager of having these thoughts of, okay, so for some reason, my dad would always make some interesting comments about Mr. Jimmy. And I'm realizing that Mr. Jimmy, the electrician, lived in the quote banker's neighborhood. So even then I realized there's probably something there. And I do lament of, like, when you think about close calls.
I'm assuming the banker's neighborhood is like this glamorous neighborhood, like nice area.
It's pretty decent, like swim tennis community. It was definitely like something you were aspiring to live in a nice neighborhood, nice houses, pool, tennis court. And so here's an electrician in my dad's eyes, but he actually was the head of the IBEW. And I lament that, wow, what if, and this was right before, so in Atlanta, they hosted the Olympics in the 90s. And so as I'm coming out of high school, as I am thinking about what to do, I lament and think, what if I had actually gotten under Mr. Jimmy's wing and had gone into the apprenticeship right out of high school? All of that work for so many years in Atlanta, when Atlanta boomed, what if I'd been a young apprentice? Now, would I have landed in safety? Who knows?
But
You
you would
know,
have
and
been, it's funny you say that because I had in high school. I don't know if it was the same with you in high school. High school for me was academic focus. If you're not going to university or
Mhm.
for us, it was university, or you guys, I think college. Me from Canada, it's like you're like, okay, second choice, third choice, whatever. Like, but first, like it's awkward conversations with friends, parents when you're like, I'm not going to university. I decided to travel and then maybe construction. But I also had friends that went into an apprenticeship in school to be millwrights. And I tell you, man, they were so far ahead of the game by the time they got out of when they got out of high school. They were basically finished their I think it was the first year apprenticeship was done. So they had 3 more years of apprenticeship. By the time that they were 21, they were fully ticketed millwrights and killing it. Like they own their first houses before any of us. They're doing incredibly right now as individuals. All of them that did that, and they have no debt. They have all the. But anyways, I'm getting sidetracked here. But yes, absolutely, Rob. If you would have chosen to do that
Mhm.
apprenticeship in high school, it wouldn't have been
Mhm.
bad. It would have been incredible.
No, but I missed it. It took me 10 years to find my way into the industry. And I
Mm.
was hired by a general contractor that at the time had 3 contracts for a full time 40-hour safety person. Count that right in your head. 3. So, how did I get in the industry was, well, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was second guessing my choices. And I have this amazing opportunity from a president of a small family general contractor that says, I need a safety guy. Do you want to be one? And the door is thrown wide open of like, well, yeah, I'll give that a shot. And dude, I was as green as a greenhorn can get. Like, I didn't know anything about construction. I get thrown onto 2 power plants and the Atlanta airport, and all of the seasoned safety pros that I reported to, like they all knew I was green, and I had to beg all 3 of them, be like, "Hey, look, we got 2
Help me.
choices." Yeah, I was like, you can deny me as your safety person and go back to what you were dealing with, which was nobody given a you know what, or I'm here and I'm going to try hard." And all 3, for whatever reason, took pity on my soul. And man, I got my teeth kicked in for 2 years of like, you want to talk about on the job training? You go from not knowing anything about safety or OSHA, and every day you were just getting whiplashed with these laundry lists of what was wrong.
Yeah.
And I learned quick. So something about it locked in, and Rob fell in love with construction safety. And at first, it was a noble kind of badge of honor, like I'm here to protect people and life and limb. But then, dude, I've talked about this a little bit. I was trained in people that know safety. I was trained as a bad cop, and
Right.
I'm
Especially back then.
embarrassed. Oh, dude, in 2001, 2002, I'm embarrassed of how good of a bad cop I was. I mean, I was a jerk. I was
Yeah.
trained to write them up, kick them off the site. It was not benevolent safety. There's no human performance. But something stayed with me, man. And I was a safety pro for about 15 years, worked through 2 different companies. And at the time, I was towards the end, around 2012 was when I started really getting back into technology
Yeah.
and understanding what technology would do for this industry that was so paper driven. And I started
That was
blogging and
2012, you said?
well,
Yeah.
2011 is when I was starting to play around. 2012 is when I got serious and started actually doing experiments of, can an iPad work on a job site?
Yeah.
And what are these apps? And,
When
I
software started to
remember,
hit the field, right? I mean,
oh
at
yeah,
that time, what? iPhone was 4 years old? 2011,
a
2012,
couple, a
2008, I think
couple.
it was. I can't remember, but they
New,
weren't
new,
on a
new,
site
man.
because they
No.
most people were using those. I don't know if it was the same in the US, but the tough phones, the mic phones,
We were
the
using Nextels. The boop, boop, the chirp,
yeah,
the radio.
yeah, yeah,
Yep,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
what we
yeah.
used.
And you could drop them from the 14th floor of a
Oh yeah.
building into
Yeah.
concrete, chip up the
Yep.
concrete, and it would still work.
Yep. So I in 1 year, I switched over 5 workflows from paper to apps. I used these amazing little startups that you might have heard of. Like I remember using PlanGrid when the founders, Tracy, they were still on the chat bot of wanting to know how to make it better, or Raken or iAuditor or SafeSite. So I started that journey, and in 2015, jumped over with a guy named James Benham and Josh Bone. We created what we called the Contact Trio that became the Contact Crew. I traveled the country, man. I have seen behind the doors of GCs and trades, big shops, small shops, union, open shop, learned so much more about tech, and then traveled around. And earlier this year, I was lucky enough, an old connection said, "You need to talk to somebody."
Yeah,
That's
that's
when we
funny,
started having
hey?
conversations.
Yeah, it's crazy how things just fall into place sometimes. Like we were restructuring our company a bit. We started to sell into the US more. We were about 5 years old at the time, and realized that, like, for me, this is a new journey. Every step of the everything tomorrow is a completely different new thing, right? Construction was a bit of there's things I loved about construction, there's things I hated about construction. One of the things I hated was it was like Groundhog Day. Every day was a repeat of the same thing, right? We do 7 or 8 high rises a year, but I tell you, even if the architectural design was completely different, it was the same shit over and over. Floor
Yep.
week, get the windows installed, same problems. What's the crew like? What's the general contractors team like? Who's the super? Who's the GC? Like, it's just
Mhm.
rinse and repeat. Now that I moved into software, it's just been I didn't even own a laptop when I started this. I didn't know what the word SaaS meant. I didn't know anything about software, raising money, anything. I did know the industry. Robbie knew how to build the software, and we knew the problem we needed to solve. And so some of the things that protected us from making the wrong mistakes were just inexperience, right? We didn't know about those mistakes, so we didn't make them. But in order to get our company to where it is today, you have to know how to scale it. So it's been constantly bringing people in that know more, constantly bringing in people that can elevate us, we can learn from. And you like it just kind of boop, there's Rob, perfect fit for, like, okay, we're moving into the US market. Yes, US and Canada are very similar, but we didn't want to be the company that just sold from outside the country. Like, construction is so much about building relationships. I believe in building that foundation in the company on relationships, right? True partnerships. And so we yeah, bringing you in just helped us learn a lot more about the US market, understanding your view on safety, mental health, mental fitness is passion to me. And it was just like, yeah, Shireen, I remember, she's like, oh, you got to talk to this person. And that person's like, Rob McKinney, got to talk to him. I was like, okay, start with a phone call. And then I think on the first phone call, I'm like, we have to meet in person, Rob. Took us 6 months, but we finally did.
Yeah. Great minds think alike. And that's kind of how this idea, we've had a couple ideas for podcasts, but they didn't land. And then we met with a good buddy, Jeff Sample, the Iron Man of IT. And he helped us really hone in this idea, this frontline focus. And so, what we're going to bring to everybody, we've got a few seasons, we have a few ideas, and these are some of the topics we're going to bring to you. We want to talk about the hidden cost of safety because money in safety is hard. The compliance from culture, that growth from compliance to performance. We want to talk about, and Gabe, this is one I think near and dear to your heart, bridging the divide between the field and office, especially in regards to how technology is built and who it serves.
Yeah, it's near and dear to me because I feel like I love what's happened in safety in the last 10 years, because safety 10 years ago was very different. I like the direction. It's a lot better than it was. Compliance-based safety, forcing people to stop, just stop. Whether they're thinking or not is another thing. The ideal thing is they're stopping the thinking, breaking up complacency. Unfortunately, I think that we've also gone the wrong direction with some stuff. I feel like we're introducing an academic process into an industry that does not predominantly learn through academia. They learn through hands-on building and experience. And so the tools that we're using to break up complacency is creating complacency. And the tools we're using to protect workers is actually swinging the pendulum more towards protecting companies. It's all about crossing the T's, dotting the I's to make sure the company's protected, when the whole purpose of protecting the company is to prove that you're protecting the worker. And so bridging that gap is not just about the communication gap, but it's actually refocusing the industry on what matters. Are we actually putting in things that are helping workers go home safe? Is it actually breaking up complacency? Is it actually educating and providing them the tools that they need to work safer? And I don't think it is. I think it is. Sorry, I'll take some of that back. I think there's a level where if you have nothing and you introduce something and it's compliance-based safety, and even if it's paperwork, it is 100 times better than nothing. I can say that from my experience running the window installation company. But we're at a plateau. We need to break through that barrier and start actually changing it. Salus, for example, is helping companies get their head above water so that they can start focusing again on how to protect the worker. But we got to find a way to get field level workers to buy into this. If it's top down, it will always just be the bare minimum, right? Human nature. We want to find a way where a worker reaches for software or reaches for safety like they reach for a hammer, right? You don't have to tell a worker to use a hammer once a day and every week use it twice a day and blah, blah, blah. Intuitively, they know how to use it because they see the value that they get out of it and learning how to use it. Imagine a world where a worker intuitively just reaches for safety to take 5 minutes to break out complacency, or goes and takes that training course, or does this, or it's inherently embedded in their work environment and their workflow and their mental processing. You've changed it then, right? But I think we're so far away from that still, and we have to shift up the mindset. And part of that is not just talking about the people with these idealistic approaches, it's talking about the hard truth of what it's like to deal with field level workers. All the different backgrounds, upbringings, educations, languages. Do they have an iPhone 6? Can they write? Can they read? Can they whatever? Right?
That's it. That's why we're talking about these ideas and what you're getting to. We want to help future-proof this industry. Then we're going to talk about leadership. And then we'll round off a little bit of well-being, because this is a passionate subject for both of us about mental health. So we're going to bring you an initial run of interviews. We're going to batch them. We're going to sort them. We're going to have awesome people come join us. So if you like this much so far, awesome. Get ready for 4 amazing interviews about to come to you in this first season. Gabe, thank you for providing this opportunity to create this adventure. And I look forward to joining you on this wild ride, man.
Same, Rob. Let's get after it. I'm excited.
It's good stuff. So thank you for checking out this pilot episode. And we're getting ready to bring you more. So thank you for listening this far. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Frontline Focus podcast, powered by Salus. If you enjoyed this episode, then please subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast player, or leave us a comment to hear your thoughts. Until next time, keep moving safety forward.